I met Fleur in one of my classes, I think, or maybe in orientation. I was smoking so heavily at the time that I'm going to be very spare with the details. I just remember that she was small and slight, like probably could have been a model with the build she had, just very willowy, wispy, though she wasn't very tall, probably like 5'2" or 3. But the thing that stood out about her appearance was that she dressed in super baggy clothes, like the type of pants that completely removes all form from your body, and a big baggy t-shirt as well. It wasn't a sloppy look by any means. She was very put together under the guidelines of a particular aesthetic. Skater style, I guess it was. It just wasn't an aesthetic designed to reach the average man. More likely to scare him off, or at least make him think twice. I remember at one point she had said that if she wore regular clothes, I'd probably try to rape her. She sort of said it as a joke, but you could tell that she was just kind of sick of the world, or at least her place in it. She was pretty, maybe even beautiful. She was certainly attractive enough to catch my attention, even if she was hiding under all those baggy clothes. While I never really got the chance to get to know her, she made quite the impression on me, and I actually wrote a couple songs about her. Or rather, they were inspired by her. Most of it I made up, just trying to catch a particular feeling that she gave me. One of them had the lyric, "She dreams of submarines, safe beneath the waves of her heart. She dreams of the path of the perfect tear, turning her face into art. She dreams of slow motion explosions every time she sees the sun rise. She dreams of the dark fleeing fearful from her spark every time she closes her eyes." She was the type of woman I could have definitely fallen for, and probably would have in time if we'd continued hanging out. It's weird how sometimes a woman can pass through your life and you barely know them at all, but they leave a mark on your heart that you can't shake off. Maybe it's the mystery, or the old trap of assuming a lot of things about a person or wishing them, and then falling in love with those assumptions or wishes. When you imagine being in love, you always imagine a perfect love. Anyway, I got to talking to her, and it was probably clear I was initially trying to pick her up because I thought she was cute, but she made it clear right away that she wasn't interested. Apparently had a guy that she was involved with. I thought she was cool, regardless of romantic prospects, so I kept talking to her, and we eventually got onto the subject of smoking weed. We were both new in town, and neither of us had any hookups, but she said she'd seen some guys posted up by a liquor store in the hood part of town. She figured they were probably selling and suggested we go try to get a dime bag there. Fleur was from a rough area in an industrial city, so she was accustomed to this setup. What made things difficult was that in our area, the sellers were exclusively black and not very trusting of white folks. Somehow Fleur scored, though. The real problem was that the quality of the product that could be procured on the corners was not very good. We're talking brick weed at its finest. And so naturally, Fleur asked about some fire weed. Some top-quality kush. One guy said that he could get it, but that he didn't have it on him. He was going to have to pick it up, but that he could bring it by later if she wanted him to. Long story short, he got her address and came by and had the exact same weed as he'd had before, only this time in a different bag. I don't know if he thought she actually was stupid, or maybe didn't know weed very well because she was a girl, or if he thought she would just be intimidated into buying it since she had this guy in her home. Fleur wasn't tuned into the potential danger of the situation, though. She was furious. She'd been having a bad day and hadn't bought any weed because she was counting on this guy coming through with the fire, so there was an added edge to her mood. She let him know that she wasn't stupid and that this was obviously the same shit he'd been peddling. He was absolutely shocked. It was like he hadn't considered the possibility his ruse would be undetected. "You mean you ain't gonna buy it?" "Fuck no." "But what about my gas money?" "Fuck your gas money." "Fuck you, bitch." It was at this point that Fleur picked up her recent birthday present off the coffee table, a deluxe stun gun, and zapped the guy. Her boyfriend had splurged on the extra large model. I doubt he expected she'd use it on someone she had invited in, but the idea was that if he gave her a stun gun, she'd be less likely to use her real gun, which she kept locked and loaded under her mattress. She actually called her boyfriend while the guy was recovering from being stunned, lying on her living room floor, to tell him how well the thing had worked. The guy had just stiffened up and keeled over, and it was going on a couple minutes and he was still down. There was much cursing when the would-be dealer finally regained his feet and staggered out, but Fleur had no need to zap him again. I was laughing my ass off the whole time. Fleur told me that although she didn't really know anyone in the area as far as hookups, she could get Bud back home, which was a couple hours away. Not only could she get Bud, but her boyfriend was a full-time dealer, so she could get a lot of Bud at a good price. Before long, we had cooked up a plan to drive up there on Friday afternoon after classes and see if I couldn't get myself a QP. It was only going to be a couple $100, and I didn't really mind the drive because I was eager to get high and have a steady supply of Bud. For her, she got a free ride home and got to see her boo, who she had been missing. So I picked her up after class. I'd put on some nice clothes since I was going to be driving drugs around. I figured it was best not to look like the kind of guy who would be driving drugs around. Fleur was a little bit shocked. She had never seen me in those kinds of clothes before, classic cut khakis and a silk shirt. Before, I had definitely been wearing more of a hip-hop skater aesthetic, so I imagine I looked pretty well transformed. The drive was uneventful. We listened to music and talked about whatever. I was in high spirits because I was going to be getting high soon. Fleur was in a good mood because she was going to get to see her man. When we got there, the simple plan soon started to unravel. For one thing, Fleur's man wasn't particularly happy to see her. Apparently, he had been enjoying the single life a bit more than she had. His name was Corey, and he was sort of the leader of a crew that stayed together in a small house. There was one other guy named Billy the Kid, and there were a couple young women who I had less interaction with. They just seemed sort of strung out and faded and not much interested in me or the bad news I'd brought. They all sold drugs together, hustling powder and dime bags of dirt weed at the club. I got the impression that Fleur had been Corey's number one girl while she had been around, but that he had sort of let the break happen when she went away to college. And he was ready to move on and was fine with the break being more or less permanent. Now her reinserting herself into his life wasn't exactly welcome. On top of that, Corey had 2 felony convictions for dealing, and he was knocking on the door of a third at the rate he was going, considering he didn't have a real job and was selling drugs as his main source of income. There was a 3 strikes law in North Carolina, and the first 2 strikes hadn't been any sort of deterrent at all, except to make Corey super paranoid and wary. So he wasn't super excited to have a stranger showing up asking for a large amount of drugs, especially when he found out Fleur had just met me. When she'd called, she hadn't thought to mention that she'd known me for all of about a week, and that we'd met at school, etc. Corey thought I was an old friend, or someone she had at least known for a while, and when he found out that I could very well, in his mind at least, be an undercover cop on some sort of sting operation, he was pissed. He didn't let me see his thinking. If I was an undercover cop, he didn't want me to know he knew. So, I found out after the fact, he just started doing some investigating into me to the degree he could. He Googled my license plate and was trying to figure out where my car was from. Don't know what he expected to find, like the cops would keep a record of their undercover vehicles in a Google database. He got me to do drugs with him, figuring that if I was a cop I wouldn't be interested or something like that. The main thing he did, though, was stall. The QP was supposed to be just a phone call away, but suddenly there was some unexplained delay. I was as cool as I could be, considering the vibe in the house was pretty tense. I was able to just kind of pretend like it had nothing to do with me, even though I was obviously in the middle of it since I had brought Fleur and was now camped out in the house interrupting the daily routine. I didn't realize that among the other things being discussed was a plan to murder me, to have me drive a couple of them somewhere to pick up the QP and for them to then shoot me in the car and leave me there. I'd like to think this wasn't seriously considered, since if I was a cop, then murdering the undercover cop investigating you doesn't seem like the best way to get the cops off your back. But I guess if you were desperate and stupid enough to go right back to dealing drugs after 2 felony convictions, there was no accounting for what you might do if you felt your back was up against the wall. As is, they made me wait while they thought it over. Apparently they were split on whether or not I was to be trusted. The one person who thought I could be trusted was the other guy, Billy the Kid. He thought I was cool and wanted to go ahead with the deal. Corey was understandably paranoid, and the women who worked for him were paranoid on his behalf. Finally, they decided that Corey would remove himself from the situation, and Billy would handle the deal himself. All this happened without my knowledge. I was just sitting around being high, trying to be a good guest. Then Corey and a couple of the women took off. Had to go hustle, as they said. Corey assured me that Billy was going to make things right with me, and I said that was fine. I had, after all, known him for exactly as long as I'd known Corey. It was at this point that the tension between Corey and Fleur came to a head. Corey told Fleur flat out that she wasn't his girl, and that she needed to stop sweating him so hard. She was really hurt and came to me, who she quickly realized was her only ally. No one really wanted either of us there, but at least I had the buffer of being unknowingly inserted into this situation. I hadn't been the orchestrator of it, all out of Fleur's poor, lonely heart. She probably should have known better than to facilitate that deal, considering Corey's 2 felonies and her not really knowing me, but she was heartsick, and I certainly know what that's like. I felt bad for her, but I was more focused on getting my weed than anything else. While we were waiting for the weed, Billy filled me in on the adventure of that afternoon. He was obviously confident that I wasn't a cop and thought the other guys were being crazy, and of course he was right. He told me all about them trying to trace my car on the dark web and about how a couple of the girls had wanted to ice me. He said this all with a laugh. I was a bit unnerved, but believed him when he said that we were well past all that nonsense. Finally, the weed showed up, and it looked like the bottom corner had just been pulled off a brick. It was pressed into a corner shape with one jagged edge where it had been torn off. It was definitely brickweed, but it was a lot of it, and it was what I had been waiting for this entire time. I couldn't help but imagine some guy with a warehouse or garage or maybe barn or who knew what, with a truck full of bricks of weed and one of them missing a corner, which I now held in my hands. At this point, I was just happy that it had finally showed up, since I had long since started to worry that it wasn't going to show at all. I remember Billy saying something to the effect of, well, it was a long wait, but at least you got what you came for, when his phone rang. It was a call from Corey. He had a gut feeling and was putting a kibosh on the deal. He said something about the weight on the brick being off, so it all had to go back. This didn't really make sense to me, but I wasn't going to protest too much. I ended up leaving with only about a 20 bag, which Billy got me from his personal stash. He gave me his number and told me that the next time I came, I should just deal with him. He said that Corey would have to trust me now, since I had had the chance to make my move if I was a cop. I guess the fact that I'd had the drugs in my hands and no black helicopters had descended was enough to prove finally once and for all that I was legit just a guy who wanted to buy some weed. The ride back with Fleur was pretty sedate. I was tired and ready to be home and in my bed, and Fleur was heartbroken. When we got to Fleur's place, though, she asked me if I wanted to come in. She made it clear she wasn't going to fuck me just because she was single now. Like, I don't mean she let me know through hints, she said it outright. I told her no worries and came inside. It seemed like she needed the company. She got her gun, a little .22, from under her bed and went out to the balcony, took careful aim, fired twice at the moon. Once to kill and once for luck, she told me. Lights were turning on in the neighboring apartments. It was late. She ducked back inside before anyone had the chance to spot her. That line of hers inspired the lyric. Once to kill and once for luck, she pulled the trigger twice, shot the moon down, put the heart on ice, then hung the hollow shell back in the sky, used the frozen heart to soothe her swollen mind's eye. It seemed to me a perfect example of life as poetry that Fleur would hunt the moon. But for the sake of all the other dreamers out there, I'm glad she's not packing anything chambered higher than .22 caliber. I don't know where the rest of that lyric came from, just seemed like the kind of thing she'd do. She put the gun away and then told me, come on, and led me into the bathroom. She said she wanted to try something. Whatever it was, I was game. She said, I swear to God, if you try to rape me, I'm not gonna rape you, Jesus. That seemed to settle it for her. She turned the lights off and it was pitch dark in the bathroom. There were no windows. She told me to take my clothes off. I could hear her taking her clothing off as well. I didn't know where this was going, but I was pretty sure it wasn't anything sexual. She turned the shower on hot, and immediately the bathroom began to steam up. Now what? I said. Now we wait. So we waited. I said I was sitting down and did so, and Fleur followed suit. I almost immediately started sweating. It was a full-on sauna effect from the get-go. We sat there naked and silent for a while. I was in danger of dozing off. After about 20 minutes, Fleur asked me, "Are you sweating?" I told her I had been sweating from the get-go. "Good," she said. "I am too." "So now what?" She felt her way over to the shower taps and turned it off. She told me to get in, moving out of the way as I felt my way past, careful to keep from being touched. I got into the shower. She told me to put my back against the wall to make room for her. She got in as well. We still hadn't touched, which was a feat in that small bathroom. Fleur turned the water on ice cold so that it came down over both of our heads, rinsing the sweat away. It was a shock. "Jesus, Fleur, what are you doing?" I was interrupted by Fleur thrusting her slick little body into my chest. I took the hint and wrapped my arms around her. Somehow I still knew this wasn't sexual, though. The cold water ran down both of our backs, and we stood there for a while, chest to chest, clutching each other tightly. I knew how she wanted to be held. Firmly, a good squeeze, just this side of too tight to breathe. I think she was crying. Her head was buried in my chest and turned away, so I couldn't be sure, but my arms around her back felt the breathing pattern of one sobbing freely. We stayed like that for about 15 minutes, sharing body warmth, shivering in the cold water, and then suddenly it was over. Fleur got out, dried off, and told me she had to go to bed. I never saw her again. I don't know if she moved back home to work things out with her beau or if she was just avoiding me or what. She didn't pick up her phone, and that was that. I felt terrible for her. It's almost like seeing someone else go through something like that can be worse than going through it yourself, at least for me. I think to myself, I'm tough, I can handle it, but can she? Fleur just seemed so mixed up and angry. I wondered if she had some rough stuff in her past. Not that it's any of my business. I certainly wouldn't judge her for it, though, if she had. I have a song that always made me think of Fleur and her baggy clothes and her heartbreak, although I wrote it for someone else. It could have been for anyone who has been roughed up to the point of defeat. "Oh, Marina, you'll be back on track, I know you will. But what do you do until then you try again and again? And soon you'll be remembering today as way back when."